Hi, everybody. My name's Kelly. I am the current president of IOSH for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think, until I hand over to Rick. And one of my day job is I'm head of health and safety and environmental sustainability, with a bit of security kind of starting to be added on for a culture and leisure trust in South Yorkshire, in a rather cold and miserable part of the UK at the moment. And one of my themes and focus areas for my presidential year has been working at height, because quite frankly, some of the worst incidents that I've ever had to experience as a health and safety professional, having worked internationally within events and sports officiating, have all involved falls from height. And if I seamlessly, hopefully, I'm able to do that. Hopefully you can all see my screen. I'm just going to check. I've got nods. I've got a thumbs up from Bob, so that's good. And in particular, what I would like to do is I would just like to take a moment to remember all of those people who have lost their lives falling from height in the course of their work. And in particular, thinking of their families, their friends, and their colleagues who have had to deal with the aftermath. I want to highlight one particular incident that was raised by the HSE and prosecuted by the Health and Safety Executive here in the UK. A gentleman called David Clover, who was employed by Ecclesiastical's Steeplejacks Limited to carry out some restoration work on the church that you can see here. I'm going to try and stop moving my mouse as well. And in Birmingham on the 13th of November in 2020. David was working in an unsupported bosun's chair, suspended 60 meters from the top of the steeple, where he fell. And very sadly died from his injuries. The company was fined £60,000, which doesn't feel like a huge amount, and the company is now no longer trading. But in passing sentence, the judge mentioned directly that the company had a very outdated attitude towards health and safety and managing health and safety. And it's not just here in the UK where we see a considerable percentage of our work-related fatalities involving falls from height, and a significant amount of cost, not just to the employer, and certainly not just to the individual, but in the governments, from a loss of income taxes and an increase in having to pay out benefits. And the human devastation is so much more than just somebody not coming home from work. It's the ripple effect to their families, their friends, their colleagues, the people who, like me, have had to investigate those kind of incidents and take witness statements, the emergency services who have to deal with seeing and treating those kind of levels of traumatic injuries. And I'm going to break it down into the physiological and the psychological costs. We talk about falls from height, and us Brits are very good at being quite euphemistic about an awful lot of things. Falls from height doesn't really cover it. We're talking broken and fractured limbs. We're talking skull fractures, traumatic brain injuries, paralysis, soft tissue injuries, if you're lucky. And then we have the psychological. A lot of people who survive falls from height talk extensively about flashbacks and nightmares, and are often diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a considerable diminished quality of life and their well-being due to chronic pain and disability. Relationship problems. I did a wonderful webinar last week where we hosted a gentleman called Dylan Skelhorn who had survived a fall from a roof, and his relationship broke down after his fall because he was really struggling with the anxiety and the trauma that came with having survived the fall, as well as the financial hardships of families, the additional medical expenses, the lost wages, and all of the adjustments and amendments that need to be made to the home in order to be able to accommodate somebody who is potentially paralysed or needs additional support. And then we obviously have the problems for our businesses in those legal costs, those reputational damages, higher insurance premiums, and the impacts on staff morale. I'm going to talk very briefly about one of the falls from height that I have had to deal with in my career. I used to work for a sports officiating business. We worked globally, we worked in 197 different countries, and we worked 365 days of the year. I had taken a very well-deserved break at Christmas, and what had happened was one of the operators had gone to access a roof on a ladder, on a telescopic ladder, and the ladder had snapped underneath him. He had fallen 6 foot, and he fell directly onto the ladder itself as well. And Kyle, bless him, had rung me first. And I'm like, get off the phone, ring the emergency services. Let's get him, so we talked through isolating and making sure that he wasn't moving. We called the emergency services, and I then started an 8-hour journey from the top of the country all the way to the bottom of the country in order to go and investigate the incident. I remember walking into the hospital the day after, as soon as visiting hours started, and asked for the individual that I was looking for, walked onto the ward, and he was at the other end of the ward in a private room. And I knew it was him because I could hear him screaming. Now, the individual himself, he can't remember any of this. He was on incredibly good painkillers, so he can't remember any of it. And I walked into the room, and his mum, his dad, and his girlfriend were around the room. And he looked at me and said, "I promise you I checked that ladder, Cal." No, it doesn't matter. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter now. And it turns out it didn't matter. It was an internal structural issue with the ladder that he would never have been able to see. And his dad towered over me and poked me in the chest and said, "What have you done to my boy? You are responsible for having done this to my son." And we looked after him. We made sure that any adjustments that were needed for the house that he was living in, as a business, we paid for additional physiotherapy, psychotherapy, not just for him but for his entire family. There was no question. Anything that he needed in order to support his recovery, we absolutely did, because it was the right thing to do. And 6 months later, he walked back into work. The fact that he did was, quite frankly, a bit of a miracle. And I'd actually invited him to come and talk on one of our webinars. And we're talking 7 years ago now. And it's still too raw for him to talk about. And it's still very traumatic for him. And quite frankly, it's very traumatic for me and my lovely little troublemaker who witnessed it as well. And we talk frequently. On bad days, particularly in the lead up to the anniversary of the incident, I still have nightmares, and I can still hear him screaming from the other end of the ward. And the level of responsibility that I feel, because I had made a recommendation to avoid back pain, ironically, to avoid back issues from them carrying exceptionally heavy sets of ladders up and down hundreds of stairs of stadiums. We had made a recommendation. I had made a recommendation to transfer to these lighter, more manual handling friendly telescopic ladders. And the result of that was that somebody very nearly ended up with very permanent and disabling injuries. He still has pain, and he still experiences, he still needs ongoing physio. But yeah, we were very lucky that I wasn't responsible for permanently injuring a very young man. But this is the thing, is we as human beings, we think we're a bit indestructible, don't we? We think that things happen to other people. I'll just finish this bit off. Safety's for wimps. It's just not cool. Or as we say up here in Yorkshire, it'll be right. Which is, it'll be fine. Don't need to worry about it. We still come across these attitudes that safety procedures hold things up, and that safety is something to make things much more difficult rather than to enable businesses. And when we're up against those kind of attitudes, not just from business leaders, but from also the people that are doing the work, we have an awful lot more to do. And despite knowing that the risk of falling is there and it's significant, people still don't always use ladders or scaffolding properly. We still work through bad weather, whether extremely cold, wet, windy, or extreme heat, just to be able to get the job done. We don't maintain safety equipment. We don't factor in the time to allow our teams to make sure that they are fitting and testing that their harness is adequate and is still safe. We still accept cultures where people don't have the confidence or the ability to challenge others on dangerous working practices. We let little things go which undermine our safety cultures, and we still don't dedicate enough time and resources to training, particularly around working at height and particularly for safety. And then we promote people who aren't trained and don't have the capabilities to ensure that they are doing the adequate supervision and the engagement that we expect them to do. So we have to listen to wise counsel. We have to follow the basic principles which is, let's not do it. Let's just avoid working at height as much as possible. If we can use pole systems or drones or other emerging technologies to avoid working from height, let's do that. Let's keep our feet on the ground and let technology do it. If a worker is not sure and doesn't know how to be safe when they are working at height, they will not be safe when they are working at height. That was part of the conversation that we were having before you all joined us. Every single one of us has a job to do. And it is really vitally important that we continue to push on the working at height theme, especially if we are working with people who are working at height. So we can and we must do better. What we don't want is poor equipment. We don't want a lack of training or inadequate supervision or complacency. I don't know about you guys, but the amount of roofers that I work with in my current position, they have a completely different attitude and approach to working at height because they do it all the time and they just stop seeing it as a risk. And they laugh at me when I'm like I want to go up on the roof and I get onto a ladder and I get a bit shaky, and they laugh at me because they just get so complacent they stop seeing it. And then in a lot of construction, we still have an awful lot of that kind of that very male attitude of it's okay, we don't challenge things, we don't speak up when we don't feel safe. So what we do need is we need clear fall protection plans, clear rescue plans that do not rely on our emergency services. We need safe work by design. We need to ensure that we're not just thinking of the people who are constructing something, but we are thinking about the people who have to maintain it, who have to clean the windows, who have to go up and access those elements. how do we make things as safe as possible when we do that? Adequate permit to work systems that aren't just tick box exercises, but are going through RAMs and going and understanding what our contractors and our construction workers are doing. Empowering people to call out unsafe behaviour. Clear, up-to-date and sector-specific guidance and much stronger safety cultures in order to improve what it is that we are doing. IOSH have introduced a new campaign based on my focus area of working at height, which is called Don't Fall Silent. And within it, there is a huge amount of, it talks about the global picture, it talks about the stories behind the statistics. So you will see some of the personal stories behind the stats and behind the number of people who do experience and survive falls, and helping to improve everyone's knowledge and raise awareness. There is sector-specific guidance in there for anything from agriculture to events, and you can get involved. I will put the link in the chat box as well, so we can see that. So there's a huge amount of resources and toolkits available for us all to make use of. I do not want to be sitting here at the end of Rick's year seeing that the numbers have gone up again. In the UK last year, 35 people lost their lives from falls from height. The year before, it was 50. I do not want to see those numbers go up again. Having experienced the reality and the fallout of what all of that looks like, selfishly, I don't want to do it again. And I'm sure you guys wouldn't want to either. So thank you for your time, and apologies for the Teams alerts that I had definitely muted during that, but technology seems to have got the best of me. I think it's my... Go for it, Bob.
Wow. Thank you, Kelly. I must say, I'm sat here and I've been making some notes as we go through, which is my want. But I think some of the key things for me that came out of that, and for those that don't know, I'm an old firefighter, so working at height is something that I've done over my career, and I've seen the approach to it and the strategies that have been taken that have changed. And one of the things that popped out to me was, as you talked about the different cultures in different work environments, especially around construction industry. And if we think about the acceleration in safety equipment that's come from when I joined the fire service 40 odd years ago to where it is now, where I would think nothing of working on a roof without any protection, how we do things now differently, how when I started doing line rescue and that sort of stuff, how we worked with knots, you know, to abseil off of things, and how you've now got abseil devices and everything else, looking back to the steeple thing that obviously was a tragedy. And some of that's very difficult to change people's attitude. And forgive me if I'm jumping across everybody else, their attitude into accepting new technology, you know, and we're all very resistant to change. But change is important. And I think that's one of the challenges for health and safety as we go forwards, as we spoke before, and about risk appetite, risk attitude, you know, risk acceptance and those sorts of things. But I found it very, very heartening, your approach to the incident that you experienced. And I fully understand the effect that it had on you as an individual and the team around you. And one of the things I implore everybody to be very mindful of is the psychological effects of witnessing trauma when you're not used to seeing trauma. Everybody in the emergency services, I tell you now, if they tell you they haven't got PTSD, they're a fibber. They're not telling you the truth. And we see it on a more frequent basis than we should. And for those that aren't in that environment, that witness just that one event, we as managers, we as people need to be mindful of that and make sure we have the policies, procedures and support mechanisms in place to help get them back to a level of normality. So that's me on my soapbox, because PTSD is one of my things. You touched on the method statements, and again, we as managers need to make sure that people are mindful of that. But one of the things, and sorry, someone may have heard me say it before, we are the ambassadors for health and safety.
Mm.
We are the ambassadors for ensuring the safety culture is there. We are the ambassadors for challenging poor behavior, poor attitude, poor activities. So my message to everybody when we go away from here is, remember, you have the ability to challenge and stop an unsafe act. That's me off my soapbox now. So
it makes me smile, because that's what I do. I sit there and say that actually, like, it's not our job to manage health and safety. It's our job to coach and support and be on the sidelines to make sure that people understand the risks and that they are doing it safely. But yeah, as I've already been told off for talking too much in the chat box, I'm going to open it. Let's open it up to the rest of the panel. And I'm going to throw this out to all of you, because all of you have different experiences with working at height. So what are some of the common pitfalls that you are all seeing when organizations and individuals become complacent? And how can health and safety leaders and business leaders simplify that safety planning? I don't know who wants to go first. Saeed, do you want to grab it? Or
Jamie was going to start, I think.
Go for it.
Ragesh is going.
Normally what I've seen in the past, and incidents, and especially in the oil fields. I've been in the oil fields a lot, and especially the drilling industry. I'm a drilling instructor also, so I have seen a lot of incidents happen work at height. Especially the guys are standing on the monkey boards, and monkey boards are about 30 meters height, and these guys are working 12-hour shift in a day. Imagine the amount of the environmental issues and all these things come together. But these guys are very, very, as you said, Kelly, that they are very used to it, because they're doing every day the same job.
Yeah.
And that is called, normally we say in HSE is repetitive jobs, So once they say, oh, we have done this 100 times before.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the basic reasons. And then, of course, you say you have the procedure shortcuts. Okay. And now, I mean, I've also done a lot of inspections in the drilling industry, where the senior guys, they are, because of the too much pressure they have from the clients to finish the work in certain period. So they just take shortcuts in the procedures. Okay. That is another big issue, which I have seen, especially in the working at heights. And then you have lack of supervisions, you have, permit issues. If you see a risk normalization, I think, Kelly, you spoke about that in between a little bit, that whatever risk, they are just normalizing it. Okay. I mean, okay, this is, okay, I mean, it's not a problem. We can handle the situations. Okay. So I'll just share with you one of the incident which happened. He's an assistant driller. He's 20 years experience in drilling. And this guy was a rig move. You need to move a rig from one place to another to do the drilling. So this guy was very confident. I have taught him many times, and he was very confident. And it was a rig move. So the most of the platforms, they all been removed. I mean, the bolts were removed. The platform not was removed. This guy went up without, he was having a harness, but he was not hooked into it. So at the end of the day, this guy stepped on the platform, which was without the bolts, and the platform fell down. This guy fell down from 30-meter height. He died on the spot. And as per the statistics from our oil fields, most of the accidents have taken place, all are experienced people. That is alarming to me, why this is happening. I mean, this is something really crazy. These guys have been 1,000 times on different trainings and module. I mean, sitting on not only, working at heights, fall protection, you have, rig inductions going on. A lot of things are going on. Still, they are not be able to manage this stuff. So this is some of the basic things. Even it is the leadership is the issue, which, if you just get into it, a lot of things are there. Reporting culture, the safety culture, which has already been touched on that. So these are all combined together, can also, basic pitfalls that is can be a problem.
I think one of the things that I've found really helpful is so when I worked at the sports officiating business, we used our direct experiences. So we used the story that I find huge power within storytelling. So we told the stories of the incident where one of our staff members had fallen through a lift shaft and fallen 8 floors and died in a tennis center. We used the story of the individual that I was referring to with the ladder collapse underneath him to talk about, and we use them not to scare other people, but to influence the way that they behaved, and the recognition that ladder checks are really important because you might miss something that might cause this. You know, we spent an extensive amount of time working at height, and you know, we have, and I think that's the thing. But those stories only work for a period of time. You see it, you bring somebody in, they talk to you, and you'll see an increase, an improvement in you know, you're working at height stats, or an improvement in your near miss reporting, and then it'll go back down. So it's never a one and done. It's never a they've done their training this year, that's it. It's you've got to continue to bang the drum. I'm going to bring Saeed and everybody else in as well.
Adding to further to Ragesh, apart from the complacency, you know, fatigue is one of the pitfalls into it. Frustrations, you know, and I do agree that people are telling us that we've been in the industry for 100 years or 10 years or 20 years. It's normal. But when it comes to the reality, no one is checking the minor stuff, which is the working at height harness could be. Right. So what we are looking for, that we need to understand first the problem. So we got the method statement in hands, the risk assessment in hands, but what is the surety that the end user is aware of all the hazards and risk, for which we always advise the people to have a last minute risk assessment or to have a hazard recognition event within your supervisor or within your team. Apart from this, you might have heard a lot that TBT, toolbox talk, or safety stand talk. Are we really focusing to have the subject into it, or is it just generic telling you the emergency, telling you where is the welfare facility? I mean, if these things come on the focus, and when we make sure that the end user, which is a worker, is well aware of the consequences of the hazards or the risk, I think it will be real time changing into it. Just to aid to our guests. Go ahead, Kelly, please.
Yeah, I'm nodding away. I talk about risk management all the time, like playing Russian roulette. And essentially what you're doing is you're either adding more bullets or you're adding more chambers. And hopefully what we're doing is we're adding more chambers. There is still a risk. It's always going to be there. Doesn't matter what else we do. But we add more chambers to reduce the risk of you finding the bullet. So I mean,
So if you
go for it.
I have a couple of things to add to what Varghese and Syed mentioned. First of all, very insightful presentation, Kelly. In fact, I would call it as impactful. A lot of takeaways for me personally. Okay, when it comes to common pitfalls, most of the things were covered, but I'm thinking the cultural differences is sometimes, you know, it could put us in trouble. You know, you may have a positive safety culture set up for all your full-time employees or people who go up and who go up to do some maintenance activities. Think about a theme park. But then when you bring in a third party for any one-off job like painting or anything, this is where the cultural differences will come in place, and they may not know how to do things, and then they may have their own culture. So when they bring in that, so that because of this difference, sometimes, you know, it could put people in trouble. So how to address this? Definitely, you know, putting all the hazard and risk assessment in place, making sure all the trainings happen, making sure people are competent, the work permits and things like that. And another thing I would like to address when it comes to pitfall is the safety harness. It's not the same safety harness every time, right? So this is one of the troubles many companies will get trapped into. So we will have to do a risk assessment and see what kind of fall arrest system or safety harness that's needed. So and it's not the same every time. So we as health and safety leaders or the concerned department should look into that and say, okay, if you have to put a restraint system or if you have to put a fall arrest system, what's the height of fall and how much uh, you know how much we should be allowing or what kind of mechanism we should be putting in. So this is something we have to, and again, not always it's that single lanyard safety harness. Sometimes you'll have to go with double lanyard. Sometimes you'll have to add few more equipments to avoid that, the incident. And coming to the leaders thing, something I would always put as RACI mapping. Obviously, most of the companies now we have very good documentation when it comes to risk assessments or method statements and a proper training document. But what we have to do is integrate all these things with a proper RACI mapping. Now, this is where the blame culture will come in, right? Okay, we may have a very good risk assessment done, and on ground how much is being implemented and who is responsible for that. So that could be a potential gap. So break down all these things. When if you take a risk assessment and say, okay, there are like 15-20 activities that need to be done to effectively implement the risk assessment, put that down, and then who is responsible for that, who is responsible and who is accountable. Okay, and this has to be very simple, and I don't want another 10-20 page procedure which nobody will read. It has to be like a card. Okay, supervisor, Mr. Supervisor, you are responsible for 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, daily briefings or daily toolbox talk, you are responsible. If you don't do this, that's your problem. So we have to take that point very straight. So if we implement that very effectively, people will take things seriously. And as Syed and Varghese mentioned, uh, skipping that pre-checks, who is responsible to check the safety harness, who is responsible to check the restraint system or whatever it is. So we have to assign that responsibilities very clearly, I believe. Thanks.
Right.
Kelly, since Sudarshan was talking about the responsibility, and since we are a construction company having a lot of working at height, and it's no longer a routine job for us, it is a non-routine and routine. It's a mixture of us, and we have to control because workers coming from different countries having different culture. We have initiated a campaign, we call it Working at Height Compliance Officers. So this is a new thing for us. We started with the zero tolerance policy for working at height, which has been signed by the group CEO and the president of the company. That's been cascaded further. And then from each project, we have selected the civil engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer as a working at height compliance officer. And we brought them for a 4 days workshop, and we had theoretical and then practical, how the formworks look like, how the scaffolding looks like, what are the harnesses, what is the engineering control, what is the administrative control. And then after 4 days, we conducted a test for them, an assignment-based test for them. And then we have given them the job, roles, responsibility, that this is in addition what you're doing. And there will be definitely incentives when we do the analysis of your project. And they will be under the mentorship of the HSE manager at the project level. Believe me, it's really changed a lot, because these working at height compliance officers are having their own team, their helpers, their assistants. So I think the message is really going across the leadership. And then once the leadership is well trained, committed, definitely it is going to the frontline supervisors and to the workforce. So it's really helping me since when I do the analysis of working at height, because every month we do, and a lot of changes, a lot of reduction into the working at height incidents.
Yeah, Sai, that's fantastic, and in many ways, I think you've been reading the questions that have come in, because there's one there that says, "What practical measures could we use to influence and educate employees to comply with working at height processes and procedures?" And what you're implementing as an organisation shows you're leading it from the top, and to embed something in an organisation, it has to be led from the top and championed from the top. And then everything by putting the like your safety officers in place, and they are allowed to challenge and correct coach, mentor. Or I think that's a really good way to demonstrate an organization can seek
Bob,
to change culture.
Yeah, Bob, it's not only for the leadership, for the work for the workforce, we do the same, like with Sudarshan in Gidea, which is one of the huge project for us, King Salman, Aramco Stadium, Lucid Motors for us, the Raya. These are the big project, big client for us. What we have done there, we call it safety school. So we call it safety training school. We are no longer conducting the safety induction. You come sit and have a presentation. No, we take you through, this is called excavation. When it go more than 1.2, we call it confined space. This is called ladder. This is called scaffolding. This is the green take. This is the red take. This is called lifting operation. So it's like taking a group of the workforce, regardless which language they belong to, they see it, they touch it, and they really learn it, which really bringing a lot of impact into their performances. As I remember, as I have stated that previously, that in many occasions that a person who is working for 30 years in his own country, which is underdeveloped or may not have the health and safety, and all of a sudden you bring him to a country which is developed, he's astonished what harness means, what helmet means. I never use these things, you know. So I think that's the best part. When you bring them to the practical stuff, tell them this is helmet, you need to use, this is the chin strap, this is the harness. I mean, it's a morale going up. And I always say, like, hear them, respect them, and they will be the great productive team.
Yeah, 100%. And I think really, if you look at the diversity we've got on the panel here today, you know, I think the language of the message is important too, you know, and then you alluded to the fact that you take specific linguistic groups together, so you give the message so they all understand it. And I think that's a really, really valuable way of trying to embed it into the workplace. I'm going to touch on some of the questions that have come in, because I think we've also, like when you talked about excavations, one of the questions here says, basically, I'm working inside a manhole 3 meters deep, which is a collapsible ladder to enter exit, which always flags a thing for me as confined space, as you mentioned earlier. To carry out works inside, can this be considered a working at height? Now, I'm going to ask you, Kelly, for the definition of working at height, because I think that will answer that one.
So I'm going to be really pernickety. Technically, it depends. It depends on where you live, depends on the legal definition of working at height. For me, and for the UK, so we used to have a 2 meter. It used to be 2 meters. Now the definition is wherever somebody can fall. So if you are on ground level and there is an excavation underneath you, you are working at height because there is a risk you could fall. If you are 30 meters up in the air, you are definitely working at height. Because fundamentally, gravity doesn't really care, does it, that much? No. And yeah, I mean, Mohammed's just put any work above ground. When your feet is above the ground, we call it working at height. Yes, but then if you've got an excavation, if you're working on the ground, but then there's something underneath you that is a big hole, that's lower than the ground. So technically you could fall into that. So it would be classed as working at height. Yeah.
For me, I think I'd look at that, and I'm looking at the other three on the panel to support me or challenge me. That if the position you're in affords you a fall potential, and at the bottom you're likely to hurt yourself. So anything, you know, it used to be 1 meter, 2 meters, you know, and now it's obviously that definition where you're going to cause harm. As part of my risk assessment for that particular environment, I would say, okay, I have entry and exit. If I have an open pit that's not barriered off, then I'm going to need to have a work positioning so I don't fall over if I'm the surface man, etc., etc. And the person going up and down the ladder, I would probably, if they weren't proficient in looking at using ladders and everything, have them lined off till they got position safety at the bottom. Working in an excavation or confined space, having a leading line to you to trace where you are is not a bad option either. You're getting me into my USAR stuff for that, so I don't know what you think.
I think Bob.
Go on.
Bob, just mentioning to the Kelly, yes, any work beyond the ground is working at height. And I think for more good information, the UK regulation issued in 2005 is the best one to read further. But we have to take into consideration the harness lanyard, 1.8 or 2 meter, because working above the ground for 3 feet and wearing a harness doesn't make any sense to you. It never can save you in any case. And we have seen in a lot of areas when we go to the workers, where's your harness? Yeah, here's the harness. I have anchored it in the strong anchor point. Okay, come down, please. And he touched the ground with the harness when it's anchored. You know,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so
So there's no pulling. Yeah.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to take that into consideration. What equipment, what PPE we're going to provide to them in order to secure them while working at height.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we all agree. Sir Afson, with some of his specific challenges with the development of the park he's in, and some of the huge heights that they've got. Not only in the construction side of it, he has to factor in the recovery, the rescue phase as well. And somebody touched about working at height and the rescue capabilities and rescue thought processes. And I'm going to leave you with that one.
Lovely question. You know, I would take that. There are two things we need to consider, right? One, we have the advantage of building all these rides in front of us, so which means we can go to the manufacturers and we can put some things as part of the design itself, right? So if you look at any roller coaster, tall rides or tower rides, it comes with a nice, safety railing or sufficient anchoring points, or the gliders where you can put the harness and then you can come down and then do the inspection or whatever maintenance activity you'll be doing. So this is something technologically we have inbuilt in most of the rides. Secondly, you were asking about rescue. Now, this is something I would even say most of the companies should be really paying attention to. We will be taking care of the first part of the problem, by doing procedural controls, trainings, giving them the right equipments. But then, if somebody falls down, you need to have a buddy. It should not be alone working. And then, if the person notices somebody falling and hanging, what happens next? So whether it's a communication device or whether it's mobile radio, who calls whom, who is at the receiving end, what's going to happen? Do you have someone who is trained in this rescue? Do we have all the equipments necessary to bring that person back? And then where is a medical facility and how do we take them? Do we have the ambulance, or how far is the ambulance station? So we need to connect all these dots, right? So for example, for these two parks, we have firefighting and rescue services stationed, right? Syed knows, it's a necessity for all the construction sites, and it's a necessity for all the parks of this size. So we need to have the rescue service provider, not civil defense. It's a private rescue service provider. So we need to have them as part of your team. Now, how do we call them? So this is where we need to have the security control room or operations base, and then a proper communication system for anyone who is going through these kind of emergency situations. They call the security control room, and security control room immediately calls the rescue service provider, activating the emergency rescue services. So within stipulated time, within few minutes, the first few minutes, I would say X minutes, they go and start the rescue with all the necessary equipment. So our risk assessment, if you see what are all the equipments we need for these kind of rescue, it's there as part of the in-house resources. Now, calling civil defense or involving them is extreme, right? So, but any construction site within Gidea or any theme park that's getting ready, we have all these resources. Pretty much whatever is needed as part of the risk assessment is there.
Yeah, again, a great answer. It's about preparation, planning, forward thinking. But what I did like in your answer there was thinking the second and third level effects. It's not just getting the person to the ground or recovering them and treating them on the ground. It's where are your medical support? How far are they going to travel by ambulance? Do I have to think about aerial recovery rather than land recovery, etc., etc.? And I think that's a really good a good thought process and development from there. Oh, geez, I'm going to ask you now, because one of the questions that come up, and it kind of falls into your sphere. At our workplace, I know my answer. We have a tank that's 17 meters high, and accessing the top of the tank is a nearly daily or weekly task. Is a safety harness required, and what's the standard? Well, obviously, the standard depends on the country, but I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, is a 17-meter height, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, 17, of course. So, of course, see, it's even what we consider here itself in Kuwait. I mean, especially in the oil fields, we make sure that even though it is a daily routine, 17 meters height, it has to be taken care of, no doubt about it. I mean, you cannot just play around with somebody's life. What we have, especially most of the KOC here in oil fields, we are now especially monitoring with drones, these guys. Especially this 30-meter height and a lot of other locations where there are good heights, they're all being taken care of with the drones, and they have been highly monitored by that. And some of the harnesses having some kind of sensors also, few of them to monitor up. Now they are trying to introduce that here in Kuwait, at some of the locations, and try to monitor is there any issues related to that. So 17 meters height, of course, no doubt there is, even though it is a routine job, you cannot just play around with the light, no doubt about it.
Adding further, a quick one to this, Bob, if you will allow me, please. PPE is the last resort. We need to understand this first.
Absolutely.
So we need to understand this. You can't rely everything on a PPE that I was wearing a PPE. So I think we go back to the basic of health and safety, which is ERIC PD, eliminate, isolate, reduce, and all of these things. And then if it's really necessity to have the harness or the restraint systems, all of these things, then it's all based on the risk. We are short of time, I believe.
We've got 5 minutes left, I think. So
just to add to, I'll take just 30 seconds just to add to what Said mentioned. Yes, he's right. So we should not be focusing mainly on PPE, eliminating or substituting or having the engineering control should be our priority. So if you look at this side of the world, theme parks, so we are technologically we are doing the track inspections using trolleys, robotic trolleys. So these are small vehicles which can go around the track. So you can, and this is having a 360-degree camera, so you can do the track inspections using that. So this completely takes off the person who has to go throughout. So fantastic elimination mechanism. Drones are being considered for inspection. So a lot of, again, with all this technological innovations, we are taking leverage out of it, and as much as possible, we are trying to avoid human intervention, especially when something has to happen at higher levels.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. It's like putting somebody at risk is the last option, know, and so if we can eliminate it another way or change our system of work, then that's the goal. I'm learning lots today, so that's good. So I know we are running tight on time, and I've obviously got to start thinking about drawing it to a close because we got like 3 minutes left. I want to put on record my thanks for you, the panelists, because I think the discussion has been first class, and we've only really asked one general question around the group, and the conversation flowed, different experiences, but we all came out with like a consensus, and I think that's the real key. At the end of the day, health and safety is different around the world. We know that's applied differently around the world, but as I said earlier, we're the ambassadors, so we need to make sure that we take away something from here, and by challenging, even our managers that don't want to spend the money on a piece of equipment or to even research the fact that we might be able to do something differently. That's our job. That's our responsibility. It may not be a paid element, but it's something that we all have to take on board. And going back to Kelly, when you take that personal, that empathetic feeling into the workplace to look after the people, because we are caring people. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this field and doing what we're doing. Okay. I'm going to quickly run around the room and ask you to give your summation in 30 seconds, your soundbite for today. So Varghese.
Yep. I think what you said is right. It has to be part of all the team, starting from the leader down to the bottom level. Each one has his own responsibilities, and normally we call it as dominoes effect. So this dominoes effect has to go from the top, otherwise it's not going to work properly. So the leadership has to take charge of that. Automatically, it is going to go down to the lowest level. That's it.
100%. Leadership is important. Citizen?
Health and safety should act like a catalyst across the organization. So we are not a standalone department who will go and do things. So it's a culture, the way we think, the way we work. So we as health and safety leaders should be successful to a greater extent in implementing this. So any department, not only work at height or any job for that matter, they should think if they need help, they should come to us. They should not think health and safety as troublemakers or showstoppers. They should come to us, and we should have that, mindset open, right? Okay, fine. You have a problem. I'm here to support you. Let's do a risk assessment. Let's do it together. So that should be the way we should think and work.
Super. Saeed?
Protect yourself, protect others within the vicinity. Use every single right to be a safe person for the society, because this life comes first. And I mean, once, so you have to apply everything to save yourself and save others.
Yeah. Last, Kelly?
I think for me, fundamentally, everybody's number one job when they go to work is to go home to their families and friends and their communities. And it is our job to help them do that.
Most definitely. So thank you once again. I've made a couple of notes as we went around there. Leadership, health and safety to be the catalyst, protect yourself, protect others, and I'm going to draw the session to a close. And again, thank you everybody for attending. Without the people that have attended, we'd have been having a nice conversation ourselves.
Yeah.
I want to thank IOSH.
Thank you.
And I want to
Thank you
thank
very
the
much.
Middle East
Thank
for
you
the
very much.
opportunity to bring this really important topic to the fore. So thank you very
you.
much indeed.